They were cast out with nothing, until they built a secret life underground. The morning Daniel and Ruth Carter were thrown out of the only home they had ever known, the temperature in the Appalachian Mountains had fallen so low that even the creek behind the farmhouse had frozen solid. Their breath turned to white smoke in the air as they stood in the snow, barefoot in worn stockings, holding a single cloth sack that contained everything they owned. 2 books, a wool blanket, and a small piece of bread wrapped in paper. That was all that remained of their lives. Daniel's older brother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his face hard as stone. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply said, "You ask too many questions, and she thinks too much. We can't feed people who don't know their place." Ruth did not cry. She had stopped crying long ago, the day she learned that tears only mattered to people who cared. Instead, she took Daniel's hand, and without looking back, they walked down the frozen path leading away from the farm, into a world that did not want them. They walked for hours through narrow mountain roads covered in ice. The cold burned their skin, then slowly turned into numbness that frightened them more than pain. Daniel kept moving because he knew that stopping meant death. Ruth stayed silent, her mind racing with survival strategies she had once read in books but never imagined she would need. By late afternoon, the light was already fading. The mountains were darkening into shadow, and the wind was growing sharper. Just as Daniel began to feel despair creeping into his chest, Ruth noticed something strange along a hillside. Snow had melted unevenly in one spot, forming a shallow dip in the frozen ground. She pointed toward it weakly. Daniel cleared away the snow with his bare hands until he uncovered a heavy wooden door built into the earth. It was half-rotted but still strong. With effort, he pulled it open, and a wave of air brushed past them. It wasn't warm exactly, but it wasn't deadly cold either. Inside was a series of underground stone chambers carved deep into the mountain, likely old root cellars abandoned decades earlier. The thick earth walls trapped natural heat, keeping the temperature steady despite the winter outside. That night, Daniel and Ruth survived by closing the heavy door and curling together on the dirt floor beneath their blanket. They did not sleep much, but they stayed alive. Over the following weeks, survival became their only focus. Daniel repaired broken walls, cleared debris, and built small fires using dry wood he gathered from the forest. Ruth organized their limited supplies and rationed food carefully. They melted snow for water and learned to move slowly to conserve energy. Then, on the 17th day after they found the shelter, Ruth made a discovery that changed everything. While exploring the deepest chamber, she noticed damp soil along the back wall. When Daniel dug into it, he broke through into a natural limestone cavity. Inside was a narrow cave where a small spring of clear water flowed continuously from a crack in the rock. The water was cold, clean, and constant, and the air inside the cave held a steady temperature that felt almost gentle compared to the harsh winter outside. Ruth stared at the spring for a long time, her mind connecting ideas she had once read in agricultural manuals and science books. She turned to Daniel slowly and said, "This mountain can keep things alive all year." Daniel understood immediately. From that moment, they stopped thinking only about survival and began thinking about building a future. When spring arrived, they expanded the underground chambers. Daniel reinforced the walls and created ventilation shafts using hollow logs. He carved drainage channels to keep the floors dry. Ruth cleared the hillside above and planted wild herbs and hardy vegetables she gathered from the forest. But their greatest breakthrough came when they acquired 2 thin goats from a distant farmer who considered them worthless because they produced little milk during winter. Underground, everything changed. The steady earth temperature protected the animals from extreme cold, allowing them to stay healthy and conserve energy. Within weeks, the goats began producing more milk than expected. Ruth used her old books to teach herself cheese making. The cave's natural humidity and constant temperature created perfect conditions for aging dairy. At first, she failed many times. Milk spoiled, flavors turned bitter, and precious food was lost. Each failure only strengthened her determination. She kept notes scratched onto flat stones, adjusting her methods slowly until one winter morning she tasted a batch that was smooth, rich, and unlike anything she had ever known. That was the moment their lives changed. They began trading their cheese and milk in a nearby town. People were skeptical at first, but the quality was undeniable. Word spread steadily through the mountains about the couple who had built a hidden underground dairy that worked even during the harshest winters. Farmers came to learn from them. Families found new ways to survive. What had started as a desperate attempt to stay alive became a system that helped feed entire communities. Years later, on a quiet winter evening, Daniel and Ruth stood at the entrance of their underground home watching snow fall gently across the mountains. Ruth leaned against him and said softly, "Do you ever think about the day they threw us out?" Daniel nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "Yes," he said. "Because that was the day we lost everything the world gave us, and gained everything we built ourselves." Below them, warm light glowed from the underground chambers they had created together, steady and strong beneath the frozen earth. And in that quiet mountain valley, their story became proof that sometimes the greatest lives are not built in comfort or acceptance, but in the coldest moments, when two people choose to stand together and refuse to give up.